Welcome to the final seminar in our webinar on self-awareness, human development, and conscious evolution. I have enjoyed putting these conceptual models together, and I hope that you have found this experience to be personally valuable. It has been my purpose in these seminars to offer a perspective for engagement in the world based on personal awareness and knowledge of human development. My intended outcome was to create a model for participation in the conscious evolution of the planet. These are lofty goals, to be sure, yet ones that I knew could be achieved. The webinar introduced perspectives on human consciousness, theories of human development, and ideas from some of the important scholars and thinkers of our time. We've experienced this dance of awareness in many ways. We've seen how awareness empowers us to act. We've seen the nature of the self in Jung's model of the psyche. We've seen the interplay of Maslow's self-actualization and transcendence. We've looked at the Kohlberg-Gilligan insights into moral reasoning. And we've seen self-empowerment through Gebser and Wilber's human development models. We've also looked at non-dualistic philosophies from both Eastern perspectives and Western science. Here are a few of the random notes that I gleaned from seminars 1 through 7. Being aware is the key. The path we are on provides clues for the path we will encounter. The self individuates by bringing the unconscious into view. Self-actualization addresses human needs. Transcendence addresses our higher consciousness. Moral development is learning to do the right thing as we pass through life stages. The postmodern man and woman combines the best of waking up with the best of growing up. The power of the monk's being was in his daily acts of goodness, not in showing others the way of his faith. The sacrament is not the sacred. Participate actively and consciously in one's own evolution. The gates of the future are open to all in a direction in which all together can join. Let's go to the deep awareness that we have shared since eternity. So what? How does this really relate to me? I'd like to share an experience I had as I was approaching my 65th birthday. I wanted to do something to show to myself, to prove to myself that I still had it, so I got on an airplane through to Europe, across Russia, and to eastern Siberia, where I joined 5 other people. We got on a helicopter, flew north into basically the tundra of Kamchatka. We got some rubber rafts, floated for 7 days each on 2 rivers that had never been floated before. The experience was wonderful. I survived and I returned. On a return trip through Moscow, I stopped and spent an evening. And one of the things that I did is I purchased this object. I purchased this babushka doll in Moscow. And I thought maybe Carmen would like it. It's one of those dolls that you've no doubt seen since childhood, that you can take apart. It's sort of like probing worlds within worlds. As you move down through the various layers, you find more. and more, until you eventually get to some kind of a core. Since childhood, we've been given models or metaphors that encourage us to go deeper into ourselves beneath the surface of appearances. The experience with the babushka doll teased me as a youth to probe the depth for answers. In this, we could have used an onion as well. As you peel away the onion, you probe into deeper levels of your inner life, some of which brings about sadness and tears. Or we might have taken the wooden figures apart and asked, what does this tell me about human nature? Applying some of these lessons of the webinar, I find that the dolls to be a metaphor for life, with each wooden figure representing one of the 5 states of being. I see the littlest one, the smallest me, as being the skin encapsulated ego. Self is lost somewhere at this stage of ego. A second layer, a layer of what I might call self-reflective awareness, represents the next stage. And as I move through personal awareness and self-reflection and form a relationship with the people, with my family and the people around me, I move into another level of consciousness, this one being the level of community. This is the personal community. As I move through life and gain a greater sense of who I am and what life is all about, I might move to another level, a level of the global community, one that transcends the ethnocentric behavior or outlook and embraces all of the human family. As I move further along in my own development, I might develop a sense of the greater cosmic reality. I might get a sense of oneness, a sense of a greater awareness of the entire cosmos. Now, it's one thing to talk about this and to show various levels that you and I can go through. But I think it's another thing that's an important thing to look at is where the general population resides at these various levels. For example, the first level that I spoke of, or the skin encapsulated ego, there's been a great deal of research over the years done to determine where our human family resides at these different levels. In other words, what percentage of the population resides at each level. It's been found that in the first 2 levels that I showed here, the skin encapsulated ego and the sense of being self-reflective or being able to recognize that I have a self, that those 2 levels, we find that about 40 to 60% of the population of the world exists at these 2 levels, at the skin encapsulated ego and at the basic level of awareness. Further research has shown that at the local community level, the sense of family, tribal level, that about 30% of the population finds their way to that level. At the larger global level of consciousness, we find that about 20% of the population resides there. And finally, at a cosmic consciousness or a higher level of awareness, we find that only about 5% of the population has risen to that level. At one level of experience, as I see the fullness, the manifestations of life, I'm filled with optimism. Yet at another, I'm filled with a sense of urgency as I recall where humanity stacks up on these various states. Consider that 40 to 60% of humankind live their entire lifetime at the first two levels, either the skin-encapsulated ego or simply self-awareness. That 30% of the population live in an awareness of the ethnocentric community consciousness. That 20% live their lives having an awareness of a global community, and that less than 5% live at the integral state of being. Wow. Little wonder that people in our country are so divided. Yes, we have a big job to do, and it would be easy to see our challenge in life to be insurmountable and to just appeal back into daily life. Still, if we look at the human development charts, we can see that we are making progress as a species. Critics asked Teilhard de Chardin if his theory of society heading towards some spiritual convergence was plausible, given the awful things that are going on in the world. War, poverty, hunger, hatred, apathy. How we would ever come to consensus and learn to cooperate. Teilhard's answer was that modern society is very young in comparison to the history of the species, taking the last 200 years of modern times and comparing it to the 200,000 years that the human species has been on the face of the earth. We need to view progress as a long-term goal. And of course, we will have setbacks, such as the one we are currently experiencing. If we consider Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar, we might be given some basis for hope. For simplicity, Sagan's model takes the first 13.7 billion year lifetime of the universe and maps it onto a single year or 12 calendar months. Using this scale of understanding, the Big Bang takes place on January 1st at midnight, and our current moment is December 31st at midnight. Each second throughout this year calendar represents 434 years. Sagan's scale would equate modern history to less than 1/4 of a second. You can see from this metric that modernity is a small part of the history of the world. We've come a long way, and the blips of history that we use to judge our current evolution might be too small on which to generalize. Still, given the current civilization's ability to destroy itself, even this cosmic calendar is not particularly comforting. Will we have time to evolve as a civilization before we destroy our environment or ourselves? Consider the analogy of a fish pond. A fish pond might provide a small village a source of food. One day, a seed from a distant land might blow onto the pond and produce large leaves and flowers. If each week the plant reproduces itself, it would double the area that it covers on the surface of the pond. One day, a villager might go to the pond and notice that the weed was limiting the habitat of the fish, that they were catching less fish. And the next week, that same villager might notice that the pond weed has increased much more, especially if it's able to double every week. In fact, the fishermen might go back to the elders of the village and say, "We've got a real problem in our pond. It's beginning to fill up with weed." And the elders might say, "Well, yeah, this is something we should look into." And perhaps they'll take that issue on in the next council meeting. Well, 1 week later, the villagers go back to fish, and they notice the pond is maybe 1/4 full. of weed. And they go back that day and they tell the elders, this is really an important issue. We're losing our source of food. And the council might say, okay, well, we've decided to hire somebody to come in and look at this issue. And in the following week, the pond goes from 1/4 to 1/2 to completely full. And in the following week, the fishermen come back empty-handed and finding that the elders of the village are addressing the issue too late. This scenario can be compared to our generation's social issues, such as racism and inequality. It also applies to our environmental status, such as destruction of the habitat and global warming. As time is lost in addressing the issue, our options are diminished. I don't know any other way to put it, except to say that low consciousness people generally consider the short view, which might manifest as greed, materialism, and exclusivity, thus consuming the planet and all its resources while depriving others from getting a fair share. Well, now what? What are our options? What can we do for our future? It seems clear that humanity is at a crossroads, and that those who have awakened to the problem of the planet or to the problems of the planet need to effect change now. But how? Survival is, in fact, the greatest challenge of our civilization. Consider the approach of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva sits in practice perfecting his or her being while gaining a sense of a global or a cosmic reality. Now, when you think of a bodhisattva, think of somebody who commits themselves in this way. It's like somebody is going up a mountain. And they're going up the mountain to see what's on the other side, to see the light and the joy that exists at a higher level of consciousness. As they progress up the mountain and they come to the crest of the mountain and they look over the mountain and they see light and they see joy, they realize they have two options. One option would be to say, now that I have seen that light and experienced that joy, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in a monastery meditating on that light and that joy. Another option would be to say, and this is what the Bodhisattva does say, okay, I have seen this, and I will go back down the mountain and spend the rest of my days with civilization. And I will not rest until I have assisted everybody up that mountain. You might recall that this was Teilhard's view as well, that just because you see a larger reality or see what needs to be done, that you don't just apply it to a chosen few. The answer is to find a way to bring everybody along. In this final installment of our webinar, I will offer a model of engagement with life as a sample for others who might want to develop their own action strategies. My action model is simple. It starts with 4 basic intentions or core values for engagement. And these values are meant to foster love, compassion, equanimity, and joy. One's basic values live at the core of all actions, and they set the tone for engagement. The engagement itself spirals out into the world dynamically from these core values in a way that serves all planetary citizens. For my own purposes, I've selected 4 areas of engagement. These areas, I refer to these areas as quadrants of engagement. The first one is cultivating consciousness and spirit. I feel that in order to be effective in what I do, I really need to have a practice. I really need to meditate. I need to find ways to still my mind and still my soul so that I can go out into the world with a clear mind and a clear heart. Another area or quadrant for me would be an area in which I'm engaging in lifelong learning. I'm taking information, creating knowledge, and also learning to apply knowledge in a wise way. So it's information, knowledge, wisdom. So that when I go into the world, I can go in with a factual basis, I can go in with a strong mind, I can go in with a good rationale for what I think needs to happen. That leads me into a world of service. Service to the community, service to society, service to the environment. So that's quadrant 3. And then quadrant 4, as I'm cycling through, from the core of love, from the core of value, into these various quadrants, into these various levels of engagement, either levels of engagement with myself, levels of engagement with the knowledge base of the world, or level of engagement with the society and the environment. The 4th level of engagement for myself is to participate in the creative dance of life. What this means is not to get so hung up with doing or perfecting or making things perfect, or even being overly obsessed with what's going wrong in the world. I've got to give myself an opportunity to breathe, opportunity to celebrate, an opportunity to create and to paint or dance or do sculpture or write or do things that nourish my soul and nourish others in the process. The process I'm describing is a dynamic process. It's a moving spiral of intention and action across time. As one's action in the world progresses, each of the 4 quadrants would be revisited cyclically. One's life trajectory then would be a continuing movement into the future as one worked on the engagements of inner peace, applying knowledge wisely, participating in the development of a civil society and a sustainable environment, and enjoying the creative dance of life. It's important to note here that one really needs to do an objective self-assessment to assure that he or she is not guided by a negative set of intentions or behavior. This could set in motion a self-defeating down spiraling that could lead to depression and illness. This self-deprecating behavior is really egocentric and does not contribute to the creation of a better world. To be effective, our potential path of service must be cooperative, free of judgment, and free of spiritual materialism, and committed to the highest aspects of human nature. Cultural anthropologist Angelos Arion loved to state, "We walk the mystical path with practical feet." As with the monk herding story, the projection of our own positive spirit will serve as a role model for others. We know that transformation and transcendence are a part of our life experience. Every particle of matter, Every spark of energy that has ever existed since the Big Bang exists today. They have just been recycled into other forms. Scientists call this the law of the conservation of matter and energy. Consider that all the molecules in a living system were at one time inanimate objects, plants, animals, or other human beings before reconstituting in us. Now that's transformation. At an individual level, every cell of our body serves us only for a limited time. Skin tissue might serve us for 2 or 3 days, and all the cells of the body and all of the molecules and all the organs of our body, except the brain, are replaced every 7 years. Now that's transformation. All of our responses to life mature and develop across time. Our needs, our self-concepts, our morals, our spiritual perspectives, our understanding of life purpose, all of them change. They change completely across our lifetime. Now that's transformation. Since awareness leads to human development, which is transformation, and transformation leads to a dramatic shift in behavior as we view ourselves in a new conscious light. That's transcendence. And if we choose to change our life based on a higher realization, that's conscious evolution. Transformation leads to transcendence, which leads to conscious evolution. And collectively, as a civilization, our collective decisions that are guided by a higher realization, gives us a collective human conscious evolution. Since we can reflect on our progress and make choices, we can affect or participate in our own transformation, transcendence, evolution. This dynamic is what sets us apart from all other living creatures on the planet. It is our human imperative. It is our human imperative to consciously evolve. What a great opportunity and responsibility we have to play a role in our own destiny. Let's use our power wisely to help create a loving, compassionate, inclusive, and joyful future. And let's be sure to have fun, to paint or write or dance our way through this wonderful life. Carlos Barrios, a Mayan elder, puts it this way: the greatest wisdom is in simplicity. Love, respect, tolerance, sharing, gratitude, forgiveness. It's not complex or elaborate. The real knowledge is free. It's encoded in your DNA. All you need is within you. All the great teachers have said this from the beginning. Find your heart, and you'll find your way. Thank you for joining me in this quest.